The music and singing round them seemed to falter, and a silence fell. Bilbo looked quickly at Frodo's face and passed his hand across his eyes. I understand it now, he said. Put it away. I'm sorry. Sorry you have come in for this burden. Sorry about everything. Don't adventures ever have an end? I suppose not. Someone else always has to carry on the story.
Welcome to the Wayward Wizards podcast. Today we are reading Book 2, Chapter 1 of The Fellowship of the Ring, a chapter entitled Many Meetings. I'm Zach. That's Logan.
Yo.
Here we are. This is an emotional first reading.
Yeah, I really struggled getting through that. Bilbo's regrets.
Yeah.
At Frodo having to bear this burden of the ring.
Yeah.
And the effect it's having on Frodo, but we'll get to that interaction here in a little while. We follow a chapter which is variously exciting and
Nostalgic almost?
yeah, nostalgic, some fan service.
Yeah, calling back to The Hobbit a lot. Yeah.
You know, even though the hobbits have Aragorn with them, they get a little lost. They spent some time being lost, and then there's this huge, exciting climax at the ford, and darkness falls on Frodo. And then here at the beginning of book 2, we have Frodo waking up and finding himself in a bed.
Not knowing what day it is, or
yeah, he doesn't know how long he's been asleep.
He's like, was I ill? Where am I? What day is it?
It's funny. He says he thought he had slept late. Like, oh, maybe I just slept in,
Yeah, maybe I'm in my hobbit hole, but he notices that the ceiling is shaped funny.
Yeah. Dark beams richly carved.
He realizes that he's not in a hobbit hole because the ceiling is flat.
I love this. He lay a little while longer looking at patches of sunlight on the wall. That's so beautiful. I mean, you wake up and have that moment where you're just sort of looking around,
Yeah.
Getting your bearings. You're like back in the waking world. And he just talks to the ceiling. Where am I? And what is the time?
And the ceiling answers. In the house of Elrond. And it's 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
It's the morning of October the 24th, if you want to know.
Good old Gandalf.
So Gandalf returns after a long absence. And looking at my timeline notes that I have here. So they leave Hobbiton the day after Bilbo and Frodo's birthday on September 23rd. And now it's October 24th. So it's been almost just over a month. Everything that's happened has happened over just over a month. Mm-hmm. And we find out that Frodo on Weathertop, that was 17 days ago. So really the action of the book that we get in book 1 is really only over just a couple of weeks. After Gandalf's long absence, after the party, like the adventure that we've had so far has really only been a couple weeks long.
Yeah.
And then it kind of jumps forward in time very quickly while they're in the wild. They're in the wild for, 10, 11, 12 days. And then Frodo sleeps for 4 days. And now here he is in bed. And Gandalf's back.
It's very comforting having Gandalf back.
Oh, it's been so disorienting not having Gandalf. Yeah.
It's almost like being back at home or something. Because he's such a solid character, and the characterization is so strong of Gandalf. That he gives us steadiness or something that even Aragorn doesn't really. It's nice having Aragorn part of the story, but or part of the party, but Gandalf is really the dad.
yeah, it's like without him, they were never supposed to be on the road without him.
Right.
And we mentioned last week that when they get to the Troll Downs, the Etten Moors or whatever it's called,
Mm-hmm.
where they find the three trolls from the Hobbit, we mentioned that in the story of the Hobbit, they leave Hobbiton and then they're kind of like yada yada yada, and then we get the story of the trolls.
Right.
And then in this story, there's all this trouble that happens in between Hobbiton and the trolls.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, what's missing between those two stories? It's like when Gandalf's with you, things go a lot smoother.
Absolutely.
And when Gandalf's gone, things are a lot harder.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's comforting to have him back. But we still, like, if we're reading this for the first time, we still have no idea where Gandalf's been or what has happened. And neither is Frodo. And that's really one of the first things that he asked. He's like, where were you? And Gandalf's like, I'm not allowed to talk to you about it, really. Elrond has told me that all you're supposed to do is just rest today and no talking.
Mm-hmm.
But he kind of just leaves it at, I was held captive. And Frodo's like, what? You? Like who could hold you captive? And he's like, I really can't get into it, but just know that there are powers in the world for good and evil. Some are greater than I am, and against some I have not yet been measured. But my time is coming. And so there's a little bit of foreshadowing there. But yeah, if you're reading this in 1954, you don't know about Sauron. Sauron is just very briefly mentioned in chapter 2, The Return of the Shadow. And there is a little bit of foreshadowing, showing that he maybe isn't someone that we can trust fully, but we really don't have any idea about who he is as a person. But we're about to find out that, Gandalf was held captive by another wizard.
I love that Gandalf, when Frodo cries, he's flabbergasted that Gandalf could be waylaid in that way.
Yeah.
He says, yes, I, Gandalf the Grey. Yeah. He knows he has a reputation as a powerful person. Yeah. But, and maybe there's a little bit of foreshadowing about the confrontation with the Balrog here also.
Oh, yeah.
There are some powers in the world that are greater than I, or at least equal.
I think the other obvious person that he's talking about, the other power that he's talking about, is the Witch King of Angmar.
Right.
And that's really his foil in the story. Gandalf is this source of consistency and strength and comfort for the hobbits because he's so capable. But we just had, 200 pages of Frodo being completely out of his depth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to see how he's like shocked that there is a situation or an enemy that would be beyond Gandalf's capabilities as well.
Yeah, and that's sort of scary. I mean, as much as we're excited to see Gandalf again, we also know that there's things out there that could waylay him. We get some kind of exposition or information about confirming about the riders and that they're 9 servants of the Lord of the Rings, and that Gandalf didn't know about them.
Well, it says that he did know about them.
Well,
but he didn't. He knew about them, but he didn't suspect that they were abroad.
Didn't know that they'd arisen again.
Or else he never would have left Frodo in the first place.
Yeah, he would have always just stayed. And that's, I think that's important. It's important to show kind of Gandalf's care for Frodo and the hobbits.
Right.
And also to show that the ring wraiths are really not just a force to be, trifled with. They're right. Definitely as scary as we think they are, I guess.
Yeah. Or even scarier. Yeah.
And we get there's so many nice little tidbits in here about big people. I love that that Frodo says he's grown fond of Strider. Not exactly fond, but he's dear to me. He kept us safe, but I didn't think any of the big people were like that. I didn't think big people were like you, Gandalf. I thought that they were just sort of stupid.
Yeah. But he corrects him. He's like, Barleyman
Butterbur, yeah, he
is
says, just like kind of stupid like Butterbur, or wicked like Bill Ferny. But apparently not, and Gandalf says, well, Barlowman's wiser than you think. And yet he can see through a brick wall in time, as they say in Bree. So we get another
saying of Bree. Yeah.
Bree saying, which is what Barlowman kind of trades in, which is funny that Gandalf picked that up from Barlowman probably.
He is almost kind of mimicking the way that he talks.
And then we get more background about Aragorn as well, because Frodo says, do you really mean that Strider's one of the people of the old kings? I thought they had vanished long ago. I thought he was only a ranger. Gandalf says, only a ranger? Yeah. The rangers are these people from long ago. Right. That's what we find out, that they're kind of a remnant of these folks who moved from Numenor. They're not just a bunch of dirty, transients or whatever.
I think it's interesting that he says, the race of the kings from over the sea is nearly at an end. It may be this War of the Ring will be their last adventure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like a level of understanding of the stakes that I don't feel like anybody else in the story really has at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But like, just think about what we learned from that. It's like, we're in a War of the Ring. It's like calling World War II while you're in World War II. Like you don't really do that. You think of it in terms of where you are now, but he almost has this like kind of like long view of just exactly what the stakes are. One thing that we kind of skipped over that I think is worth mentioning is that Gandalf knows things about Frodo's journey that he hasn't told anyone else.
Oh yeah, he like reads his mind.
Frodo hasn't told anybody else about the fact that he almost abandoned them in the Barrow, which I think kind of shows like maybe that Frodo's like a little ashamed of it, or maybe he just doesn't, want to like bring up a sore topic with his friends. Like, hey, remember when I
almost left you guys? Yeah.
Yeah. Gandalf was like, you talk long in your sleep. And then he's like, but also, it was kind of easy for me to read your mind while you were sleeping. A little creepy.
Yeah. Yeah. Weird. There's some powers there that we don't get too much of a glimpse into, but there's certainly something going on there where there's some sight or something into the sleeping world, or
right,
the ability to read somebody's mind. Pretty interesting. I love how mysterious all that just gets left. It's something that it's a great thing about this book for sure.
It kind of they don't really talk about it very often, but really not until the end of the book, like towards the end of the book, we get an image of Elrond and Galadriel and Gandalf at night speaking without words to each other, just reading each other's mind. And I guess, we get the image of Galadriel coming up towards the end of this book, reading Boromir's mind and reading Frodo's mind, and Sam feeling like he's standing there without any clothes on. So I think that it is just something that they're really spiritually powerful.
Yeah.
Characters in this book are able to see the truth without the need for words, which I think is actually, it speaks to Tolkien as a scholar of words, as a philologist. I think he had this understanding that words were a signifier of a deeper meaning that was really not possible to be communicated through spoken or written word, but that there was a time when language was perfect, and it has kind of become similar to the way that everything fades in Lord of the Rings or in Tolkien's universe. That there's like an entropy of language as well. Like there was a time when language was more perfect.
Like it was a perfect expression of the thing you were beholding in nature or something.
100%. We get a little bit of insight into sort of the lore of Elrond in this chapter. We get the the poem that Bilbo writes in the end, which gives a little bit of background into Elrond's history, we learn from Aragorn in a little bit that Elrond has sons who are out kind of surveying the land and getting news and reporting back to Aragorn. And we find out that Elrond's wife had been abducted by orcs and had been tortured by them. Mm-hmm. And so that's why his sons are so interested in fighting orcs. And they're so restless about it. And we also find out that Elrond basically saved Frodo's life. Like, he was asleep and he was very ill, but then just the night before, Elrond had found a shard of the knife. And Gandalf says, "We have been terribly anxious, and Sam has hardly left your side day or night, except to run messages. Elrond is a master of healing, but the weapons of our enemy are deadly. To tell you the truth, I had very little hope, for I suspected that there was some fragment of the blade still in the closed wound. But it could not be found until last night. Then Elrond removed a splinter. It was deeply buried, and it was working inwards."
And we find out that the blade is notched.
Yeah.
So yeah, you were saying last week that maybe the blade was designed, for this purpose, to leave shards in it, in the person that it stabs, and you were told that it's gone, but I think we know and get some indication in last chapter and this one that the wound is not something that will ever necessarily leave him. So even though that shard is removed, he still carries almost like a moral injury or something,
like a spiritual wound.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, here we finally get an answer. We've been asking this question for the last couple episodes.
Yeah.
Why they didn't just kill Frodo outright. But Gandalf just tells him here in this little bit of exposition. He says, "They tried to pierce your heart with a Morgul knife, which remains in the wound. If they had succeeded, you would have become like they are, only weaker and under their command." So there's the word command again. Mm-hmm. "You would have become a wraith under the dominion of the Dark Lord, and he would have tormented you for trying to keep his ring, if any greater torment were possible than being robbed of it and seeing it on his hand."
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
That having been a ring bearer, seeing it on the hand of probably anyone else, but maybe particularly Sauron, is like awful, even worse than being tortured or something.
Well, I mean, the only two examples that we have of people who had the ring for an extended period of time and then lost it are Gollum and Bilbo.
Right.
And of course we know that Gollum is completely wretched. Seeing that Frodo has the ring is torture to Gollum. But like in just a couple pages when he's reunited with Bilbo, he has this, the bit that we started with is him having contrition for how he just treated Frodo at the thought of seeing the ring again.
I actually think there's a more complicated reading there.
Please, go ahead.
Bilbo asks to see the ring. Frodo feels reluctance at showing it to him. And Bilbo says, "Well, I should just like to see it for a moment." And Frodo has it on a chain. And he drew it out. And Bilbo put out his hand, but Frodo quickly drew back the ring. To his distress and amazement, he found that he was no longer looking at Bilbo. A shadow seemed to have fallen between them, and through it he found himself eyeing a little wrinkled creature with a hungry face and bony, groping hands. He felt a desire to strike him. The music and the singing around them seemed to falter, and the silence fell. Then it says that Bilbo looked quickly at Frodo's face. I don't know if this is actually a description of the way Bilbo looks.
Yeah,
I think Bilbo. Yeah, Bilbo wants the ring. He wants to touch the ring. He wants to possess it just as he used to.
Yeah.
But I think that it's interesting that suddenly the action becomes about Bilbo looking at Frodo's face. So Frodo is terrified of Bilbo in this moment.
Yeah,
He sees Bilbo in a way, it's like a ring induced hallucination, maybe.
absolutely.
And so, it's not as simple as Bilbo like actually changing, right?
No,
Like,
not like in the movie.
and again, like, yeah, it's similar to the thing about, Gandalf, growing larger in Bag
Yeah,
End,
right.
that that the ring equally is working on Frodo and Bilbo.
Yeah.
And Bilbo is equally terrified of Frodo's
Mm.
reaction
Mm-hmm.
to him. And so, they're at risk of like losing, they each have like lost some part of their humanity or whatever,
Yeah.
hobbitness.
There's like a Deagle Smeagol kind of thing going on there.
Yeah, it's really tragic. I mean, it's tragic that this thing has come between them in some way. And they do have a nice moment later, but it says, and here it is, a shadow seemed to have fallen between them.
Yeah.
And through it, he found himself eyeing a little wrinkled creature with a hungry face and bony, groping hands. He sort of sees Gollum in a way.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what we're intended to be invited to imagine is like Bilbo becoming Gollum.
Yeah, but it's not like he has sharp little teeth and like
I think you're exactly right. But I think it is chilling. Bilbo, perhaps because he hasn't been to the Council of Elrond and he talks about how Gandalf is being closer than usual. But Aragorn has kind of filled him in about the nature of the ring.
yeah,
And Bilbo almost kind of like nonchalantly is like, I offered to head back to Hobbiton and grab it and bring it here, but they seem to think that I was like, too old or whatever, and that the enemy would just make mincemeat of me. So, I get it. They didn't want to trust me, but it would have been no big deal. I could have just gone back and got it. But like we know, like okay, if Bilbo had gone back for the ring, like that would be the worst possible outcome because the ring was already working on him.
mm-hmm.
And he was already obsessed to a level that was unhealthy. There's something so unsettling though about seeing Bilbo, who we trust and know, and who Frodo trusts and knows so well, to see him have this almost like drug addict kind of behavior,
Mm-hmm.
which I think like, you and I both have like dealt really intimately with people who are addicted. I just can't, it's almost cliche at this point to say that Gollum is like a drug addict
I would
or
say,
that the ring is like a drug.
yeah, I think it is. I would say the people, and we're talking about folks who've experienced, chronic homelessness, mental
Yeah.
health disorders, as well as, chronic addiction. And there's a way in which those folks have lost themselves
Yeah.
to a degree that goes way beyond, even kind of mainstream media representations of what addiction is like.
Right.
And so, and to lose that part of yourself is really a tragedy. The ring goes, I think, even farther beyond that. It has similar characteristics, but it certainly does recall that, and then the way that Gollum is portrayed in media,
Yeah.
unfortunately, comports with the vision of some of the folks I know who are
Right.
actively using and misusing drugs. The thing that the ring does is creates the like it. People don't take drugs in order to be addicted to drugs. Like they don't take
No.
drugs to get the harms.
No.
They do
Right.
it to address another issue,
Right.
usually.
Right. Right.
And the ring, even more powerfully than most, street drugs, it hollows out a person out in a way, and like creates that condition,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
keeps them kind of desiring and wanting it, even if they didn't maybe have that condition in the first place.
Right.
Frodo seems like a pretty healthy and whole person, you know. Um, I don't think Frodo's at risk of like, getting addicted to fentanyl or whatever.
Right.
Um, but the ring, Yeah, the ring is, well, it's evil. I mean, it's
Yeah.
and that stealing someone from themselves is sort of the,
Yeah.
you know, one of the worst definitions of evil I can think of, or
Damn.
best, I
Yeah.
guess.
I mean, it's funny. I was reading a Reddit thread, which is, not recommended, generally speaking. Um, and somebody was talking about Andy Serkis's portrayal of Gollum, which I think has to go down in history as like one of the best, like,
It's a great
on-screen
performance.
performances ever. It's a shame that he didn't get an Academy Award for it, I think. But they were talking about how he pretty explicitly was using drug addicts like as a model for like his physical portrayal and his like the way that he spoke, and it definitely it lends itself to people being like, okay, the ring is like drugs, or it represents drugs. And like this forum was like this thread, people were talking about how, Tolkien in the trenches of World War One, he would have known people who were addicted to morphine and, were in withdrawals of morphine. And so he's like describing people who are in withdrawals and all these things. I think that's really misguided. I think Tolkien was working on something deeper. The ring is not drugs. It's not a metaphor for drugs in the same way that it's not a metaphor for the atomic bomb.
Mm-hmm.
But we can map the behavior that we're seeing onto people who behave similarly, and we can draw comparisons between the two. So I don't want to take it so far as to say like, yeah, the ring is not an allegory for drugs. It's not an allegory for the nuclear bomb, but that doesn't mean that we can't apply it to, the people that we know who struggle with this. And I do think it's chilling to see Bilbo say like, hey, I'd just like to see it one more time. Like, hey, can you, like, you still got that on you? Like,
and to try to reach out and touch it. Yeah. Yeah.
Like that to me is really chilling. And it's almost like disappointing. It's almost like when the veil of wholeness is kind of revealed and you see someone at their weakest moment. But I think it's beautiful how quickly they recover from what could be, potentially a relationship ending experience. Frodo very quickly forgives Bilbo, and Bilbo very quickly moves on from it as well. But yeah, especially in this reading, that interaction really stuck out to me.
Yeah. It's a moment where you feel so much joy for them having met each other again,
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
you're sort of like wondering, well, is Bilbo here? Where is he?
Yeah. And there's all kinds of foreshadowing and hints before we get to this reunion. They're kind of keeping it from Frodo. It's like, why didn't you guys just tell Frodo that Bilbo's here? It's a little,
right.
Little weird that you didn't tell him, maybe to get him too excited.
So you feel so much joy of them, and you see their own joy of being reunited and they're like excited to tell stories and news from the Shire and things. And then this thing just kind of remains between them. And, and it does, as I said before, when we were talking about nuclear weapons a few episodes ago, I think the ring reads drugs into the story, that even if they're not intended, they are there because of our own, what we bring to the text. And, and certainly this kind of meeting,
what was it you said a few episodes ago? You said, sometimes we read the text and sometimes the text reads us.
Yeah, exactly. The text reads our world and our experience as much as we read the text, and more so, actually, I think. I think I just think it reflects, the kinds of relationships that we have in our own world. I mean, this kind of meeting has happened, countless times between people who truly love each other, but who are who have a shadow drawn between them. So, yeah, I'm glad we could touch on that a little bit. I know we had to go forward in the chapter a bit here. So where were we? I can't remember exactly where we were. In Frodo's still in bed, but
yeah, I guess Frodo hasn't left bed yet. Yeah, but, Gandalf is basically saying, like, it was a close shave is the word that he uses, the phrase that he uses, and he describes how the fragment was still in him, really until the night before, and if Elrond wasn't so skilled, he would have been a goner, and he would have become under the command of the Dark Lord. I do think it's interesting. You mentioned this last episode. Gandalf is surveying Frodo. He's giving him a look up and down. And we get this strange internal dialogue of Gandalf,
which is rare,
which we don't usually get.
Yeah.
I can't think of another time in the entire book that we get the narrator telling us what Gandalf thinks. Usually we get that through what Gandalf says.
Yeah, and I had to reread it. I put a big question mark next to this little paragraph, and I had to reread it a couple times. I was like, I couldn't quite understand what I was looking at. But yeah, it's the internal thoughts of Gandalf evaluating.
We get the internal thoughts of the hobbits quite a bit.
Yeah.
Like, for example, when Gandalf and Frodo reunite in the second chapter, we have Gandalf saying, "Oh, you look exactly the same as you ever did," and Frodo says, "Oh, same. You look great too." But we get this like internal thought of his saying, "But really, he looked more careworn and he looked older and more burdened." And that's kind of what we get here. So, like, the wizard's looking him up and down, and it says, "But to the wizard's eye, there was a faint change. Just a hint as if it were of transparency about him, especially about the left hand that lay outside the coverlet. Still, that must be expected," said Gandalf to himself. "He is not half through yet, and to what he will come in the end, not even Elrond can foretell. Not to evil, I think. He may become like a glass, filled with a clear light for eyes to see that can."
Just before this, we've heard about the way that the elves may fear the Dark Lord and fly before him, but they won't serve him. And the chief foes of Sauron are here in Rivendell. They're the elven wise, the lords of the Eldar from beyond the furthest seas. They don't fear the ring wraiths, and here's why. For those who have dwelt in the blessed realm live at once in both worlds.
Yeah.
And against both the seen and unseen, they have great power. So Frodo was able to see this kind of shining out of Glorfindel in the last chapter.
Right.
Then we're told that there's, different powers in different places, which I think is really interesting. There's a power too of a kind in the Shire. Right. But this transparency, it's not that, part of Frodo, well, maybe it is that part of Frodo kind of starts to live in a different realm.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what it is, actually.
He has to go there at the end of the book because part of him is already there, right? Like, or something.
So I think when he goes to Valinor at the end of the book, he's not going to the unseen realm. He's just going to, the seen realm, which is separate from Earth, right. but it's just to be like in the light of the Valar, and that gives him, strength and healing. But I think, like, with Glorfindel and Gandalf and other spiritual beings, they exist simultaneously between the seen and the unseen realm.
Right.
And I think that mortals can't ever. So, like, the ring wraiths, they live in the unseen realm, and they're able to cover their invisible bodies with robes and things, but they are not alive anymore. Mm-hmm. They're somewhere between alive and dead because they can't exist in both worlds at the same time. And I think, like, if Frodo were to be pulled, he was being pulled. He was kind of like in between the two, in between the veil. But if he'd been pulled all the way over, there'd be no getting him back.
But he lives the rest of his life, in some sense, with at least like, well, here we, it mentions his left arm, like
Right.
an appendage or something in that world. And the fact that Gandalf can see it is really fascinating. And then you wonder, like, we don't get this description, I don't think, but, does Elrond look at, is Elrond in the same spot as Glorfindel? Because Glorfindel died and came back.
Right.
Right. And so,
right. So
maybe
Elrond's not as old as Glorfindel, and Elrond was never in Valinor.
Yeah. So maybe not.
But I think he's definitely got a kind of a similar spiritual power. So I think there's probably a sense that like these like spiritually powerful beings, when they look at Frodo, they know, oh, okay, you're wounded,
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they were able to see it in a way that Frodo's friends and, other mortals aren't able to see. But I think like when Elrond and Gandalf look at Frodo, maybe they're not seeing him like he's transparent necessarily. Maybe that's more of a metaphor, but they can like see like, oh, okay, this is a wounded person. And, really from this moment on, Frodo isn't the same. Like this is when Frodo kind of takes on the kind of the magnitude, the spiritual stature of like a saint. I think like he has endured a pain that sanctifies him, and he's not perfect, but he is different from the others after this point, I think.
I don't know if I'm just tired or what, but I'm like really struggling not to weep. I'm just like on the edge of tears, like thinking about Frodo going through life with a wound that his friends can't see.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, God, it's just so sad. And he is healed by Elrond, but he isn't whole. And he has, and it's not like he's done. You know what I mean? I mean, Gandalf says
he's not even close. He's not even
Gandalf
close
says
done.
he is not half through yet. What does that mean? Half through his journey?
I think so. I think Gandalf, even though Frodo willingly takes on the burden of taking the ring to Mordor, I think that Gandalf knows that he's really the only one that can.
Yeah, and maybe he's even more equipped or in some way. I do think there's a way in which people who've experienced profound suffering, moral injury, and have lived through it have some kind of ability to bear suffering willingly, in ways that folks who haven't maybe had that same experience can't. And so but to have this terrible journey ahead of you and to have already been wounded in such a way is
it's deeply beautiful.
Yeah, it's extremely affecting. And we get to it's so funny. We get to hear that actually being the ring bearer, and this is skipping past all those awesome stuff about the flood and the magic that Elrond and Gandalf put in there, and the boulders and the
shape of the horses,
the shape of the horses, and what they can see and what they can't, and Glorfindel, and his wrath as the elf lord unmasked and all that kind of stuff. Frodo says, "Why is everyone taking so much time and trouble to show me so much kindness?" Like he doesn't deserve it or something. And Gandalf says, "Well, there are many reasons why they should." And Gandalf smiles at him. I am one good reason. Gandalf never apologize. Gandalf doesn't play it small. You know what I mean?
No, Gandalf knows that he's just so legit.
I love it. Well, I'm one reason. The ring is another. You are the ring bearer, and you are the heir of Bilbo the ring finder.
Yeah.
And that means you're somebody in the world. Like these people respect you because of who you are and what you're doing. Frodo quickly falls asleep after this, but he wonders where Bilbo is. And but Frodo is certainly becoming someone and has become someone.
Yeah. And from this point on, he is the ring bearer. Like, I don't think anybody has referred to him and with that like honorific up to this point. Maybe it's not an honorific. Maybe it's it's a great burden. I don't think anybody would want to be the ring bearer, because it seems like, we haven't really talked about this that much, but when Gandalf tells Frodo to throw the ring into the fire in the Shire, he's not able to do it.
Yeah.
And just now he just said that if Sauron gets the ring back, it'll be like unimaginable torment. Partly because he's going to be made a slave, but also it'll just be torture to watch somebody else hold the ring.
Yeah.
And so really there's no one else that can do this. Like, Gandalf knows that. Frodo doesn't know it yet.
Yeah.
Frodo still, I think at this point, thinks like, okay, I was asked to bring it to Rivendell and I've done that. But Gandalf, I think, realizes like, okay, we have to take it to Mount Doom. We're about to make the long argument for why that's the case next chapter.
Right.
But Gandalf knows it from the beginning. He's like, there's only one end to the story, and that's somebody taking it to Mount Doom and throwing it in themselves. But Gandalf knows that nobody else can do it but Frodo.
Mm-hmm. And
he knows that it's going to break him.
Yeah.
So like, imagine like Gandalf sitting there too. Like, he loves this person sincerely. And he's just like, I'm asking this person to die. Like, I know like they weren't able to throw it into the fire in Hobbiton. And that means they're not gonna be able to throw it in the fire once it has an even firmer grip on his mind. But they don't have any other choice. They say like, all we can do is the next right thing. And
exactly.
We just have to hope that when the time comes that grace will bridge the gap of what's possible.
Exactly. And the wise here, Elrond, Glorfindel, and Aragorn, as well as Gandalf, they recognize, I mean, I think it is an honorific. Ring bearer and ring finder are honorifics because fate chose them. And fate doesn't mean accident. Fate means God.
Yeah, fate means providence.
In this case, right? Providence, exactly. And so God's providence has chosen these people to bear the salvation of Middle-earth, the world. And that means something if you're one of the wise. And then I just have to touch on this really quick because it's Tolkien sort of being like impressed with himself.
What's that?
Well, he says, I wonder where Bilbo is. He's kind of starting to, I think, nod into sleep here. But he says, I wonder where Bilbo is. Gosh, he would have loved to hear all about this. It would have made him laugh. The cow jumped over the moon.
Yeah.
And the poor old troll.
Yeah.
And with that, he fell asleep.
So I mean, the cow jumped over the moon is the unless somebody is like listening to this back to back to back, you may not remember.
Yeah.
The cow jumped over the moon is the poem that Frodo recites when he falls off the table at the Prancing Pony and the ring slipped on his finger.
Yep.
And but Mary also, like, later after that, when Mary's told the story, he also says, God, the cow jumped over the moon, and then he falls asleep. So it's kind of a callback to that as well. Like, they just think this is so funny.
Silly image,
but of course we know Tolkien actually wrote that poem, so it's
a callback to his own, work.
He's laughing at his own joke. Yeah. Which I think is pretty funny. And then here comes Sam.
Yes, here comes Sam. I love the description of, is this in The Hobbit, the last homely house east of the sea?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Merely to be there was a cure for weariness, fear, and sadness. And I think Sam kind of agrees. Although that we don't really get to hear what Sam thinks until Frodo and Sam have a deeply strange interaction.
Slightly erotic. Well, so I mean, there's a reason why people for decades have had fan fiction about Frodo and Sam being in love,
getting down.
I mean, Frodo is like, he's a bachelor till his dying day. Sam, of course, marries Rosie at the end. But there's definitely an intimacy between the two of them that is rare to see between men in the modern day.
Romantic,
but not sexual.
Medieval masculine love
Yes. I mean, I think it really mirrors the friendships that Tolkien had in his own life,
Yeah.
both as a young man and as an adult. He would not have had intimate friendships with women.
Yeah.
Um,
Inappropriate.
it'd be seen as deeply inappropriate, but he did have intimate relationships, non-sexual relationships with men throughout his life. So much so that when you read letters between him and his friends or him and C.S. Lewis, a lot of people, especially in the modern day, read it and they think like, okay, are these guys like getting down?
Yeah.
Like they clearly love each other. And they did. They were
Mhm.
deeply in love, but they also, it was not a sexual relationship. I think that, I mean, even his relationship with his wife had this like, this reverence to it. I think in a lot of ways he was probably closer to his friends than he ever was with Edith.
Yeah, I think that that like reverence love precludes the kind of close um equitable love that we as modern people cherish in our relationships with our partners.
Yes.
Um if you have that kind of reverence for someone like, well, Edith or, you know, um Arwen or
Aragorn and Arwen. Yeah.
yeah, it it's not there's not an equality.
No, Aragorn and Arwen, I don't think say a single word to each other in this entire book.
No,
And it's
they're
such
not
an important plot point.
they're not friends, and
No.
I think it's not that actually it's not that long ago that you can read descriptions of, you know, men who are friends walking down the street together holding hands.
Absolutely.
And I think about, I used to have a job at Starbucks, and these two Middle Eastern guys would come in. They were middle aged. I was like 18 when I worked at Starbucks, so they were like, you know, old men to me, but they were probably in their 50s or 60s, and they would sit on the same side of the table
Yeah. Hold hands.
and not exactly hold hands, but sit right next to each other. I was like,
Very close proximity. Yeah.
what is going on over there? And then I took a sociology class in college, and it was like, oh yeah, like there's all these different ways of being friends. You know,
Yeah.
it's not about like fist bumping and high fiving at the game. It's about like,
Yeah.
you know, really enjoying each other's company and having this like equal relationship that all of our like worry about like, am I gay or not, like precludes. It was like something has been like taken from us. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. The beauty of intimacy and, friendship that is not sexual.
Yeah.
I think we kind of can't imagine non-sexual intimacy anymore. But I think I'm just going to read this section for how Sam touches Frodo, because I think there's a lot there to unpack. It says, at that moment, there was a knock at the door, and Sam came in. He ran to Frodo and took his left hand awkwardly and shyly. He stroked it gently, and then he blushed and turned away hastily. "It's warm," said Sam, "meaning your hand, Mr. Frodo. It has felt so cold through the long nights. But glory and trumpets," he cried, turning round again with shining eyes and dancing on the floor. "It's fine to see you up and again yourself, sir." I think it's, he takes his hand, and then I think he realizes, like, okay, maybe this is too close, because there's this dynamic between the two of them. It's his master, it's his boss, and he's not supposed to just like run up and stroke his hand, but there's and so he blushes, but he doesn't blush because he's like, like
he blushes because it's impropriety, not because it's,
yeah.
I want to say though that, I mean, I don't want to preclude people's desire, interpretation or something here. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Maybe they should have gotten in bed right then. Like, I don't know.
Well, famously, Ian McKellen, who, speaking from my own experiences, one of the first gay people that I knew about growing up, because I grew up in a pretty conservative part of Texas.
Yeah.
So I did not know any gay people that I knew of.
Right.
And I remember listening to the actor's commentary on the extended edition of The Fellowship of the Ring, and Ian McKellen saying about this scene in the movie, as a gay man, this scene really touched me. And so I went up to Sean Astin and I said, don't forget to grab his hand.
Mm.
Like, it says it right there in the text. And it's very important that you have this moment of intimacy with him. And he said, as a gay man, it was very important for me to see that. And so, yeah, I think those readings are not just appropriate. I think they actually add a level of importance to these texts. And I think I don't know. I think it's important for us to kind of just mark how special their relationship is.
Yeah. And maybe they help, maybe they help us as, I mean, you and me, as straight men, whatever that means, I mean, the whole idea of sexual identity is so modern as well, but, it helps us to understand the possibilities for intimacy between two men.
Yeah.
To go all the way to the end of the idea here of this sort of homoerotic thing that we are reading into the text.
Yeah.
Like, let it go. Like, yeah, like think it through to the end, because that's how much these guys love each other, especially by the end of the book. I mean, God, like Sam's got to pick Frodo up and carry him on his back. Like, come on.
Yeah. They're so intimate that Sam almost like apologizes to Frodo when he gets married. Do you remember that?
Yes, that is fascinating. I mean, it's a foreign idea to us to be that.
And like looking into Tolkien's biography, which he would hate. I'm sorry, Professor Tolkien. I know you're rolling over in your grave.
Yeah.
When C.S. Lewis got married, Tolkien was furious. And he just didn't get it. He's like, I don't get this relationship. I think it's deeply strange. And he was so wounded by it that their friendship suffered from it. So much so that when C.S. Lewis's wife died, Tolkien didn't go to the funeral.
It's very odd.
And like, I have to read into that and just be like, yeah, I mean, he felt almost betrayed that his lover would find completion in someone else, and to the point where he resented it. I
have disliked my friends, like partners.
Yeah.
But if they died, I would like show up for my buddy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that
it's not a good look for Professor Tolkien.
But that's well, and it is petty. I mean, it's petty, but I think it's also, it comes out of a way of being friends that I don't understand.
Yeah.
At least a platonic friendship, I mean, I guess, I wouldn't go to my wife's other husband's funeral. Right.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. That's kind of the level of like betrayal.
I think that's on the level. But it sure does read as petty and strange.
Yeah.
But they're happy to see each other. Sam is so happy that he dances.
He says glory and trumpets, which I think is such a great Fatty Bulger.
Yeah. Glory and trumpets. That's so sweet. Turning around again with shining eyes. Maybe he's got a little bit of maybe he's welling up a little, his eyes are shining because they're a little wetter than usual.
And they get Frodo and Sam, they're joined by Merry and Pippin. And
yeah.
Pippin jumps up and down and says, "Make way for Frodo, Lord of the Ring." And Gandalf says, "Hey, hush." Gandalf's such a dad. You're so right.
Yeah.
He says, "The Lord of the Rings is not Frodo, but the master of the Dark Tower of Mordor, whose power is again stretching out over the world. We are sitting in a fortress. Outside it is getting dark."
Gandalf's been saying many cheerful things like that, said Pippin. He thinks I need keeping in order, but it seems impossible somehow to feel gloomy and depressed in this place. Pippin's such a little shit.
He's like, oh, Gandalf's been really, really light, and yeah. I'm sure my kids say the same thing. Like, "Oh, Dad's in a great mood today."
Yeah.
Wow, Dad's really saying lots of cheerful things today.
Oh, it's so funny. Gandalf's been saying many cheerful things like that.
But they have a feast in Frodo's honor. So they said it's a feast to honor the victory at the ford of Bruinen, and they sit in places of honor. And we get the first image of Arwen, who is described as having the very image of Luthien.
She's a mega babe.
Mega
Time.
babe, 10 out of 10. And kind of similar to how Galadriel is described later, just people are just falling over themselves with how beautiful she is.
She's like the reincarnation of Luthien.
Yeah.
Almost.
Who's described as the most beautiful babe that ever lived in the history of all babes.
The most beautiful babe of all babes. The babe to end all babes until Arwen comes along.
I mean, that's basically what Strider says in the Knife in the Dark chapter. He's just like, and Luthien, whew, just man. But yeah,
we get a cool, right before we see Arwen revealed in her glory, we get a cool little description of Elrond, Gandalf, and Glorfindel sitting on a dais. And they were revealed as lords of dignity and power. However, we then find out that Gandalf is shorter in stature than the other two. So maybe that 5'6" description. I am taller than Gandalf. Let me just
the short king. Yeah. Maybe that's why he likes to hang out with hobbits so much. Maybe he's like insecure about his height.
Yeah, it makes him feel tall. And I love this description of Glorfindel. We get his shining hair again, but then it says, on his brow sat wisdom, and in his hand was strength. Man, awesome.
And a voice like music.
Yeah, and a voice like music. His brow sat wisdom, and in his hand was strength. He doesn't even need a crown to to be seen as like this prince.
Yeah, he's got that quality of like, Gandalf has that quality of like, he walks in the room and everybody knows that he's in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Glorfindel has that quality of like effortless cool. Like he walks in the room and everybody's like, dang, this guy is beautiful and he sounds good and he smells nice, and on his brow is wisdom and in his hand is strength, and he's old but he looks young but he doesn't look young.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, and did you hear about the fact that he fought a Balrog single-handedly and like saved a bunch of women and children in the fall of Gondolin?
Right.
Yeah. Ever heard of him? Glorfindel. And then we get the description of Arwen.
I like that Arwen and Elrond are described as gray. Their eyes are gray.
Very, very old English way of describing people with blue eyes. They use the word blue.
Yeah.
A lady fair to look upon. So like was she in form of Elrond that Frodo guessed that she was one of her close kindred.
And she just has lace sort of like lying on her hair. With little gems glittering white, but her soft gray raiment had no ornament save the girdle of leaves and wrought silver. She doesn't, I mean, it's not like she's like made up. She's just naturally like big time babe. So, I love then that we get this description, maybe a little more fan service. I don't know, but we meet Glowin. He's seated next to Glowin. And
just in case you miss it, this is the same Glowin from The Hobbit. Also Gimli's dad.
Yeah, Gimli's dad. So we got Gimli coming here soon. And I guess in the next chapter we are introduced to him. But are you the Glowin, one of the 12 companions of the great Thorin Oakenshield? Quite right, answered the dwarf.
At your service. I love the kind of the manners that they show each other.
Yeah,
and like clearly, like Frodo has kind of been primed for how to talk to an important dwarf,
right?
And yeah, there's so much like politeness going back and forth. Like Glowin refers to Bilbo as Bilbo the Renowned.
Mm-hmm.
And we get this quick summary of like everything that's gone down in dwarf world since The Hobbit. Most importantly, we get a list of like all the dwarves from The Hobbit who are still around. We find out that Dwalin, Glowin, Dory, Nori, Biffer, Boffer, and Bomber are all still alive, which is pretty spectacular. They're all old. And then we get one more like hilarious fat joke. Is this the last fat joke in the book, you think?
I don't know, but
I can't think of any other fat jokes in the book. I think this is probably the last one. Like Tolkien really got it out of his system. We'll have to like keep a I think we've mentioned every fat joke that is in the book up to this point, but yeah, Bomber is so fat that he can't get off the table without a couple of young dwarves helping him up.
I don't think it's, and the thing about it, I don't think it's fat shaming.
No, but
like,
it is funny.
It's funny, but like Tolkien has sort of like a little bit of reverence for somebody who's really big. He's like, this dude, he's like, it's like a lustiness or something. Like you're a big dude and like you're so fat that you couldn't even move yourself from your couch to his chair at a table. And there are six young dwarves who are there to help out,
6 dwarves. Yeah. I mean, I just think it's funny.
It is funny.
I think it's from a different time, but it would never fly today for sure.
But it really does not. I just want to reiterate, it doesn't come across as fat shaming to me.
No,
he doesn't say like he's a piece of crap because he's so fat. He's like he's fat because he's Bomber. I mean, his name even
with
sounds
a name
like
Bomber. Yeah, with a name like Bomber, you got to be fat.
Yeah.
But then we get a subtle foreshadowing, and this will, of course, finally kind of come to its end in the Mines of Moria. But what became of Balin and Ori and Owen, said Frodo, and Glowin's face kind of goes dark, and he says, it's largely on account of Balin that I have come to ask the advice of those who dwell in Rivendell. But tonight let us speak of merrier things, and that's all we get. Mm-hmm. The idea that something's happened to Balin, and we're going to find out soon what it is in the Council of Elrond, and find out for sure what happens in the Mines of Moria. Who's not there is Aragorn. I think so we find out that he's out working.
Aragorn and Bilbo are both missing.
It seems like Bilbo just doesn't go for feasts anymore. He's too old.
Yeah, he's not.
He'd rather just sit and think.
Sit and think and write his poetry. But they go through the hall. They go into the Hall of Fire, which is this sort of underground, or there's no windows. It's dark.
It's kind of magical.
There's only one light in there, and that's this fire that's kept all year round. There's little other light. And Elrond and Arwen kind of, retire from the feasting hall into this next, sort of like a sitting room almost.
Right.
But it's like
there's something kind of mystical about it, right?
Yeah, it's like almost like mystical elvish sitting room.
People are kind of like half awake, half asleep. A lot of the imagery that's used really recalled to me the descriptions of Frodo's dreams. That we've had, and there's this sense of like music and this like kind of like this spell that falls upon him as they're hearing these elvish minstrels sing. I'm just going to read that a little bit. It says, At first the beauty of the melodies and the interwoven words in elven tongues, even though he understood them little, held him in a spell as soon as he began to attend to them. Almost it seemed that the words took shape, and visions of far lands and bright things that he had never yet imagined opened out before him, and the firelit hall became like a golden mist above the seas of foam and sighed upon the margins of the world. Then the enchantment became more and more dreamlike, until he felt that an endless river of swelling gold and silver was flowing over him, too multitudinous for its pattern to be comprehended. It became part of the throbbing air about him, and it drenched and drowned him. Swiftly he sank under its shining weight into a deep realm of sleep. Reminds me a lot of Frodo's visions of lands that he had not yet seen, and oceans that he had not seen with his waking eyes, but he's being given a vision by this other world.
I like that they find Bilbo in here and Elrond has to wake him up.
Yeah, but then he tries to play it off like he was just really deep in thought.
That reminds me,
Grandpa, we all know.
It reminds me so much of like my grandma when we'd be like, "Grandma, wake up," and
Yeah.
she'd say, "I wasn't asleep." I'm like, "Yeah, you
It's like,
were."
yeah, you were just snoring for fun. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. Old people are so great. Um, in that way, they can just sort of doze off and be like, "No, I'm here. I'm here." I'm like, "Okay, well,
It's like,
that's fine
I was asleep.
if you say so."
But he's
Um,
woken up by Bilbo's awesome story. And this is it's a lay, it's a song, a
mm,
poem, but it tells a story from the first age, which is really the last act of the first age, where Elrond's father, Arundel, realizes that Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, Satan incarnate, Lucifer himself, is going to take over Middle Earth. And so, even though there was a ban on elves and men going to Valinor, Arundel bravely takes to a ship and sails in search of Valinor so that he can make a petition on behalf of elves and men, the children
mhm.
of Iluvatar, for Valinor to come and save them. And it's like going to your death. I mean, it's been said if you break this ban, then you'll be killed. And he can't find it. He's just out, and he's having all kinds of adventures along the way. But he's just sailing, kind of like Odysseus, really. Like
Yeah, I was just gonna say Odysseus, right?
he can't break through the clouds that veil Valinor. And so what it takes is his wife casting herself into the sea with one of the Silmarils, and she turns into a bird magically and brings the Silmaril to him. That's Elwing. And with that Silmaril, they're able to kind of burst through the darkness, burst through the clouds, and find their way to Valinor. And they make a plea on behalf of the children of Iluvatar, and the Valinor come, and the Valar, the gods, come and defeat Morgoth in this horrendous war. And from that war, about half of the landmass of Middle Earth is put under the sea. But because of their bravery, some of the descendants of Arundel are given of men are given Numenor, and that's Elrond's brother. Elros is the first king of Numenor.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just going to read the last little bit. So Arundel has been given a ship that's a flying ship, and he's given the Silmaril, and he's tasked with keeping watch over Middle Earth. And this is the end of Bilbo's poem. And over Middle Earth he passed, and heard at last the weeping sore of women and of elven maids in elder days and years of yore. But on him mighty doom was laid, till moon should fade an orbed star, to pass and tarry nevermore on hither shores where mortals are. For ever still a herald on an errand that should never rest, to bear his shining lamp afar, the Flamifer of Westerness. So the Flamifer, the flame bearer, is Elrond's father, and he's watching over Middle Earth with the Silmaril, the shining light in the sky, and that light is the light of Venus.
Yeah,
It's the brightest star in the sky, and that is the light that is given to Frodo in the Phial of Galadriel.
mm-hmm.
It's the star that Sam sees shining in the sky of the desolation of Mordor,
Mm-hmm.
that gives him hope.
Mm-hmm.
It is the same Silmaril that Beren and Luthien stole from the crown of Morgoth. And so all of that is here. It's so easy to just read past it. But later when the Silmarillion comes out, people are able to finally have these stories fleshed out. But even without all that background, Tolkien's legendarium is so consistent and so just hauntingly beautiful.
And I think it's easy to skip past these poems, but I think it's really beautifully wrought. Actually, this one, I think I was a little dismissive of some of
Better than
Tom.
the boner poem.
Well, yeah, and Tom Bombadil's poetry is not so great.
Oh, Tom Bombadil, Tom Bombadillo.
Thanks for the reminder.
It's
But
your favorite.
the lines here, you said, Elwing, cast herself into the sea, magically became a bird. The Silmaril she bound on him and crowned him with the living light, and dauntless thin with burning brow he turned his prow, and in the night from otherworld beyond the sea, there strong and free a storm arose, a wind of power in Tarmanel, by paths that seldom mortal goes. His boat it bore with biting breath, as might of death across the gray. A long forsaken seas distress, from east to west he passed away. I mean, that is pretty different than, yeah, then he turned his boat, and he got there, and wasn't that brave? I mean, I don't know.
Remember when
I love
Harry
that.
Arundel, remember?
Yeah, so I love this. I mean, it is more majestic and
it sounds like it was written 6,000 years ago, right?
Yeah, and mythological than it would be if it was just part of some description on a podcast. So I have a question.
Yeah.
Elrond is an elf.
Yes.
His brother is also an elf.
No.
Elrond is a half elf.
Yes.
His brother is not an elf.
No.
His brother is a Númenorian.
Yes.
What is that about? I don't understand.
Neither do I, but so Earendel was a man.
Yeah. And Aragorn
Elwing, yes, I know. Elwing, his wife, Elrond's mama, was an elf.
Okay.
And so when Earendel is like given the Silmaril and his flying ship, he's given a choice between being essentially immortal or mortal, and he chooses immortality. But he's still a man, but he kind of like chooses like the elf way, and he's given that as a grace because of his bravery.
I see.
And his children, who are born of elf and man, are given a choice whether they will be an elf or a man. Elrond chooses to be an elf. Elros chooses to be a man. But he's given like 500 years of life or something, which is why the Númenóreans live longer.
Oh, I see.
So Aragorn is a man. He's not an elf, but he has elf blood in him, going all the way back to Elwing.
And who is Elrond? Elrond's brother is who?
Elrond's brother is Elros, the first king of Númenor.
And he chooses the
path. Yeah.
He chooses the man path.
Elros does, yes.
And Elrond chooses the elf path.
Yep.
Elros. It's confusing. Well, we'll read Silmarillion eventually, and maybe then I'll figure it out. But
then you'll just be even more confused because I've watched lots of YouTube videos to try and understand the Silmarillion. Yeah. I'm still kind of halfway.
I just kind of wanted to take the sort of I mean, I truly don't understand it, but I also want to make sure that the listeners are represented. And if they're confused, then I'm as confused as they are. And Zach is only slightly less confused.
Listen to here. Sam comes up to Bilbo and says, begging your pardon, but I was just wondering if you would be wanting anything. And Bilbo responds, and begging yours, Sam Gamgee. I guess you mean that it is time your master went to bed. Sam responds, well, sir, there is a council early tomorrow here, and he only just got out of bed today for the first time. Quite right, Sam, said Bilbo. You can trot off and tell Gandalf he has gone to bed. And good night, Frodo. Bless me, but it has been good to see you again. There are no folk like hobbits, after all, for a real good talk. And I'm getting very old, and I begin to wonder if I should live to see your chapters of the story. Good night. I'll take a walk, I think, and look at the stars of Elbereth in the garden. Sleep well.
It's a sweet ending. I'm glad that Bilbo and Frodo get to retreat and have their own time together.
However brief.
And the detail, I know we're ending in here, but the detail that they don't talk about news and they don't talk about dark shadows, but they talk about the fair things they had seen in the world together, of the elves, of the stars, of trees, and the gentle fall of the bright year in the woods. Very sweet. So next chapter is chapter 2.
The big one.
Chapter 2, book 2, Fellowship of the Ring, the Council of Elrond. It's a dense
Ready,
chapter,
folks.
and it's long, so get ready for a long episode next week. Put some chores, put off some chores so that you have something to do while you listen to us. I hope you'll join us.
A little peer under the hood. We've talked about splitting this into multiple episodes, and maybe we'll change our mind, but I think we're just going to do a big long one. So Council of Elrond, probably the densest, most difficult to understand chapter in the entire book. But we're about to get a lot of lore and a lot of philosophy and a lot of plans. So get ready. Thanks so much for joining us for this reading of Book 2, Chapter 1 of the Fellowship of the Ring, Many Meetings. If you enjoy Wayward Wizards, we invite you to share this podcast with the Lord of the Rings friend in your life. Any nerd that you know, we hope that you will help us spread the word. Like, subscribe, follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review. Give us a follow. We're on YouTube. Be sure and go there and leave us nice comments. If you have corrections or comments that you'd like to leave us, you can always email us at info@waywardwizards.com. And you can visit us at waywardwizards.com for links to all of our different services. But until next time, remember, there are no folk like hobbits for a real good talk. We'll see you next week.
Bye.